In previous takes that where I've spoken, I was talking about the differences between a pop voice and a classical voice. I've mentioned certain things regarding accents, the way in which a melody is sung, either lyrically or rhythmically, or with a certain swing or groove to the delivery of the tone, with that kind of accentuated expression in the voice to suit the style. Some of you are probably still saying, I'm not convinced about that, still not convincing me. Prove it to me that there isn't the difference between an opera voice and a pop voice. Well, there isn't a difference because just to make note, I have to give you a little bit of a rundown on the history of singing, because firstly, singing prior to the advent of the recording systems that we had in the early change of the 20th century, when voices like Enrico Caruso were, and a lot of his singers of his time, many who were retiring, of the likes of Fernando de Lucia and Jean de Resque and all these people who were luckily, and even Adelina Patti was the 19th century superstar. You'd say she would have been the Maria Callas of that era. These singers were in retirement stage, but out of their kindness they allowed themselves to be recorded in the first six systems, archaic systems of recording a voice. And then the microphone came around, which was a little bit of an additional sort of discovery and an improvement on the more older cylinder kind of recording systems. Prior to this recording era, voices really didn't rely on microphones. They had to actually study and develop a craft and an art to be able to sing. Now, where would they normally have sung? They were singing in rich people's homes with large salon sort of areas, or da camera as they would say in the old Italian sort of towns there in Italy. And these da camera rooms were pretty large and could accommodate anywhere from up to 5 to 20 or 30 people, depending on the size of the mansion or the house. They used to have little concerts as entertainment because there was no radio, no TV and all the rest. All the electronic stuff which came into existence in the 20th century wasn't around in the 19th century. So singers didn't sort of just go around singing at the top of their head in a place like that where it was very formal. If it had to be formal, you know, people would give you a chance if they knew you were sort of training to be a singer, and it was very exciting for people in those times to hear someone who was well trained and singing the latest and most in music at the time. At the time it was opera. Opera was the pop music of the 19th century, and classical music of any sort, if we're looking at the German, Schubert and Schumann and all that school there, and a lot of folk music coming from all over the world, from the eastern countries right through to the western countries. Folk music was the in-pop music of the time. But even so, people sang musics of all genres, and there were no microphones. So, and the greatest singing school, the advent of singing teaching, thanks to the Renaissance, was inspired by the Italians. So the Italians, for over 300-400 years, had to develop a system of being able to teach the young upcoming talents to be able to perform the newly invented drama put in the form of vocal music on a stage, and they had to train the young voices to be able to handle these sort of operas and be able to get through them night after night and not lose their voices. Now, they had a system of teaching. The Italian bel canto tradition, as I have mentioned on my website, goldenvoicestudio.com.au, on the philosophy page. It's my first remark in a book that I'm writing, which will be eventually printed and sold in the future. Bel canto is not a technique. Bel canto is a way and style in which you sing. And if you want to know what that is, get on my website, goldenvoicestudio.com.au, and look at the philosophy under one of the top tabs on the website philosophy page. But coming back to the voices of the 19th century, when there were no recording sort of apparatuses that had yet been invented, these singers basically sang in large salon rooms. The rooms were acoustically built. They were made of stone or solid materials that had acoustic kind of properties and abilities to carry sound. They were made of wood. The seats were wooden most of the time and felted, but the floors were wooden. Wherever they had their concerts, they made sure that the rooms were acoustic and had reverberated echo sort of kind of resounding properties in those spaces. The other bigger places were the theatres. The opera theatres were built by the Italians in a way, semicircular sort of form and shape of a large stage, in order to be able, so that sound could spread out of the mouth and head out right around and reach everybody, right up to the frontal sides of the aisles, balconies, and way up into those regions of the levels of the balconies and out into the audience seated. Singers had to be able to carry, they had to be able to project the word, the voice, and also sound beautifully toned in order to appeal to the ear of the listener. So singers had to go and learn how to be able to produce volume, to project sound. They had to learn how to resonate with their entire being in order to be, because sound travels through us, and like a stone thrown in a pond, the wells then travel out to the riverbanks. Our sound, when it comes out of our mouth, and it's meant to well out. It's meant to spear out to the ear of the listener, but it's also, the body of the tone is meant to well out. To give you an example, if I'm spearing my tone, it would be that's a focused tone that is squealing and ringing. We need the baby cry squeal in the tone in order to cut through the instruments of an orchestra, if we're singing without microphones, to get past the orchestra either in the pit or on the stage, or get past all that sound and get out to the ear, the listener's ear. And we're talking about listeners not just in front of you, but everywhere in the theatre, on the balconies, right around. So we want our voice to spear out and reach, and what comes through the voice? The word. A drama cannot be a drama if the word is not understood. But from that, singers then had to not only spear out the tone and the word and be heard, but they also had to produce a tone that was going to be agreeable to the listener's ear. That is, a tone that is rich and beautiful to want to have to sit through a performance and listen to that voice. The Italian bel canto tradition, not technique, basically had two things that it taught for over 400 or 500 years. In order to sing, you must open your mouth and you need to say the word clearly. If a singer is not producing those two approaches in their emission of their voice, then there are other attributes and other stylistic features that also add to the bel canto tradition, but they're the two main things on a vocal technical sort of approach that a singer needs to be able to achieve. So if I'm singing with a closed mouth, which was common in other countries but not in Italy in that 19th century era, so if you're singing with a squeal, you're hardly opening your mouth because you're resonating. The main resonance is up in the skull. The skull gives us the squeal and the treble to the voice. Once we open our mouth and we add the vowel, which is coming from the back to the front of the mouth, okay, suddenly the tone from little squeal opens up and fully evolves its tone into a nice, rich, round, velveted sort of body which coats the epicenter, which is the squeal. We never want to lose a squeal, which is proof that we are focused through the bone, not off the throat muscles. Okay, so I'll do that again. Okay, So by opening the mouth, you're able to get the full tone. And so if I'm playing with the head squeal, which is what they used to call the 19th century falsetto, the head squeal, or which we use the squeal term or the squeal term in modern times, that was the falsetto of the 19th century. Falsetto is not the breathy, ah, yeah, what they do today, especially in more modern styles where there's a lot of breath escape and it's a disconnected voice from the reedy speaking chest tone. That kind of falsetto is actually damaging and will strain your vocal folds and knock out your voice in a very short period of time. So we want to make sure that when we're doing if we want to head into falsetto, we have to make sure it's vibrated tone, not aerated tone. Aerated tone, worst enemy to an open natural production. So there must be never any air escape in the human voice, or else you're asking for collapse in the lungs, a loosening action in the diaphragm and a collapse in the supporting muscles underneath the diaphragm.